Hi everyone, I'm Pastor Sarah Stobie from Bayshore Lutheran Church, and you have found our blog, or my vlog, if you will, for week 17 of our Biblical Lit, where we read the Bible together in 1 year. First, an apology. I have been off. I've had some tech difficulties, and I just haven't been able to get these videos downloaded. And so I had some difficulties with a few. They were I don't know, somehow corrupted. But anyway, hopefully I'm going to catch us up this week and get us to where we need to be again. And thankfully, what we have reading this week for week 17, a lot of it you can skip. So, if you will, week 17 is 2 Kings 24 through 1 Chronicles chapter 16. And as I just whispered, you can skip a lot of this. You're going to notice that First Chronicles begins and it's just a lot of descending. That's a joke. It's descendants. A lot of sons of, and you can just skip through that. If we were doing biblical genealogy, obviously First Chronicles would be a place that we'd want to go through more slowly, but we're not doing biblical genealogy. We're just reading through the Bible. So go ahead and skip through that. About chapter 10 of First Chronicles, though, you're going to notice that, this is repeating something we've already read, and it is. First and Second Chronicles are mainly repetition of what we already have read, which is parts of Saul, David, and Solomon's kingly duties and what they did, and similar stories that we read in First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings. But again, I'm going to do more about that next week for week 18. I'll talk more about why Chronicles exists. This week, we're going to focus just on the fact that we are rereading a few stories that we know in this week's lectionary of reading, if you will. And we're going to focus today on the Ark. So if you have a second, go ahead and pull out First Chronicles, and we're going to be at chapter 13. I told you could skip, didn't I? And in chapter 13, the Ark comes into play. David is now king again. Saul has died. Again, we've read that before. And David is king, and David's devout. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just stay where we are. Chapter 10. David is very devout with God, and David is prayerful, and David is respectful of God, and David wants the Ark to be with him. What is so important about this Ark, though? What is the Ark? Well, you read, I know, in Exodus how God commanded Moses to construct the Ark, and maybe your study Bible even has a picture of what the Ark may have looked like. The Ark was a beautiful, beautiful box, a box that had a lid on it, and inside the Ark were some things that were kept. We'll get there in just a second. But this Ark was so important to the people of Israel. The Ark was inside the tabernacle in the Holy of Holies, so only a few select Levitical priests were able to actually be with the Ark and pray over the Ark and to see the Ark constantly. The Ark was protected in the Holy of Holies, except, and this is the interesting part, remember how the Israelites wandered for 40 years in that desert? Well, remember how God literally dwelt with his people for those 40 years and how God was a pillar of cloud during the day and at night a pillar of fire? And this pillar was literally over the tabernacle area, over the tabernacle itself, literally over where the Holy of Holies was inside of the tabernacle, because the Ark for the Israelites was a physical sign of God's covenant with them. God made the Ark as a physical sign of his presence with them. Now, I'm not saying they worshiped the Ark, because they did not. They did not. But it was a symbol. It was a symbol of this covenant that they were God's chosen people. And God with his pillar, when God's pillar of cloud moved, everybody then would pack up. They would pack up their own tents. They would pack up the tabernacle, which was very complicated, but it was a mobile tent. Remember that from Exodus. And they would pack it all up. And then certain special Levitical priests would literally move the tabernacle and the ark at the same time and follow the pillar of cloud. And wherever God stopped, that pillar of cloud stopped, that is where the tabernacle would be erected, and that is exactly where the ark would be placed in the Holy of Holies. Now, the ark was so important to the people. The Israelites felt that as long as the ark led them, they would always have victory. And they, again, did not worship the ark, but the ark was very important to them to lead them into battle, to be placed among them, and to have the Levitical priests take care of the tabernacle, take care of the ark, and do worship as it was supposed to be done, according to the law of God. And so you can Google pictures of the ark if you would like. What was inside the ark is very simple. In Exodus, God tells Moses to put those tablets that Moses made, the second set, because he destroyed the first. He had him put those second set of tablets that Moses literally wrote down with God, the first 10 commandments. So that was inside of the ark. Another thing that was inside of the ark that would come later was a bowl of manna. Now, this symbolized the fact that for 40 years, God fed his people. God fed his people with manna and quail and provided them water. And this bowl of manna was a sign of that providence that they received. And it was also a sign of Israel's understanding that God would always provide for them. The third thing that was in the ark was the rod, the staff that God gave to Aaron to signify that Aaron was the high priest, the high Levitical priest. And from that is the priesthood of Levi, which even at this point in our reading, we can see they are in charge of the tabernacle. They are in charge of the ark. So having that rod in the ark was, again, another sign and seal of this covenant that God had made. So here we are in chapter 13, 1 Chronicles. And David consults, it literally starts with this. David consulted with all of the leaders of Israel and said, "Shall we move the ark?" And they said yes. Because again, this is a sign that David is the anointed one by God. He is the king. He and God work hand to hand together. And David is very devout. So David goes and gets the ark. And there's much singing and dancing. And again, like I said, you've seen and read this before. In Chronicles, though, I want to point out a story, though, about Uzzah. You see, God forbade, I should say, God, it was forbidden. How about that? It was forbidden that people could touch the ark. Even Levitical priests, they were to use these poles to move the ark. They were not to touch the ark. It was just so sacred. And as they're moving the ark and they're dancing around the ark and they're praying and the people are all there, the oxen stumble. And when the oxen stumble and it jostles the cart that the ark is on, and the Levitical priests, they're probably there with the poles, but it's still not going to hold up. And so Uzzah, God bless him, but Uzzah touches the ark. And in fact, you can read about this. You can read about how Uzzah, who was driving the cart, and how he tried to hold, if you will, the ark in place. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and he struck him down because he put his hand out to the ark, and Uzzah died there before God. David was angry because the Lord had burst out against Uzzah, so that place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. David was afraid of God that day. He said, "How can I bring the ark of God into my care?" So David did not take the ark into his care into the city of David. He took it instead to the house of Obed the Gittite, and the ark of God remained with the household of Obed-Edom in his house 3 months. And the Lord blessed that household. David then establishes himself in Jerusalem. And as you can read in First Chronicles here, there's the defeat of the Philistines and whatnot. And David, though, then built houses for himself. And David lived there, and the Levitical priests were taking care of the ark. But then David says, I want the ark brought into Jerusalem. I want it to be closer to me. And so it is moved. It is moved. And this is the city that becomes the seat for David, if you will, and becomes when Jerusalem becomes the place where people then come into to worship God. Because then they bring the whole tabernacle compound, if you will. It's not just the ark, but the whole tabernacle is brought into Jerusalem. The ark does lead it, and then they establish the holy tabernacle there. David did this because of his devoutness. He wanted people to worship God. He wanted people to take the commandments of what they were to do very seriously. And David appointed ministers to watch over the ark, over the Levitical priests, to make sure that everything was done properly. And then because David's a singer, chapter 16, we have this wonderful song of thanksgiving for the ark coming into Jerusalem, and basically praising God for all that God has done. So the ark was terribly, terribly important to the people. And that is why it was so crushing when the Israelites eventually lose the ark. We'll get there soon. But at this point, it's the height of David's kingdom, if you will, bringing the ark into Jerusalem, establishing the tabernacle, establishing worship patterns for the Israelites, the Jewish people, the chosen ones of God. And God and David are pretty close right now. They're very tight, and David is doing right in God's eyes. So that's where we're going to end off this week. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about Chronicles and why we have two versions of practically the same story. So thank you for joining me for week 17, and I'll look for you come week 18. God's peace to you. Bye-bye.